So, Joe, do we have to have these on? No, we've got these on.
Not to start.
No, we've got the mics on.
Only for the silent disco.
That's it, for the silent disco later. So, Joe, I hope you have some lovely gifts for the audience today.
Metaphorically, possibly.
I hope so. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your tough and difficult schedule to be here. And I know that a lot of the people in the audience are keen to hear a little bit. Let's crack on straight away. Sure. I'm not going to do the big long CV bit because you've had all that done. Give us a bit of the background to the Future of Payments Review. How did all this happen?
So the story goes that the real origin of it was a trip from the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England, who were, I believe, in India, and they were at a restaurant somewhere, and the bill came, and they paid via a QR code. And this sort of struck, so hold on a minute, that's a bit different. What's going on in the payments landscape here? And a sense of a conversation around the UK, certainly at some point, has been a leader in the payment space. Are we still a leader today? And that sort of got filtered down really into two questions, which is where do we stand today in the UK compared with the rest of the world? And importantly, how well set up are we for the future? And those became the genesis for the review. And then I had the enormous privilege, and it has been an enormous privilege, to be asked to work on it.
So tell us a little bit about the process.
Okay. So I've obviously been around the payments environment for my whole career. I worked for a retailer, a consumer goods firm, even a startup, a network provider in OpenReach, etc. So I've sort of, and of course as CEO of a bank and a building society, so I've seen payments from different angles, but I never would have said that I've been in the payments world. And it has been a great joy of this work has been that through last year, we actually had the privilege of meeting with around 150 people from payments, experts, everyone passionate about what payments do, where we need to go, some different views, but without exception, a very welcoming and very enjoyable process. And I'm really, really grateful to the support and time that everyone gave us in the process of navigating our way and really being educated into some of the intricacies of this fabulous space.
But it was a unique opportunity from an independent perspective to do this.
Well, and that's a critical point. It was independent. I wouldn't have done it, I think, if it had not been independent. Yeah. It was genuinely, there wasn't a prescribed answer or outcome that they were looking for. It was genuinely, here are the questions, go and see what you can find out. And a gloriously short time period for it as well. I mean, these reviews, everyone knows, things will take as long as you give them to be done. We had in total, starting gun to finish line, 4 months.
That's phenomenal.
Which is short.
Announced at the Mansion House speech last summer. The conclusions were, and the report was announced in the autumn statement.
Yes.
And what did you conclude? What were your conclusions?
And apologies to those of you who have studied every single word of 107 pages of it.
Everybody in the room I know has read every page.
There are
just
pictures.
in case you need to be refreshed, here are the
There are lots of pictures and graphs. Let's break it down to questions. Where do we stand today? Well, the good news and the not so good news. Good news number one, my conclusion was, based on what I saw, when it comes to paying for goods and services in person in the UK, we're about as good as it gets. Why? High penetration of high banked population, high penetration of debit cards, early and widespread adoption of contactless payments, and now digital wallets, further enhancing what's already a world-leading experience. That's good news number one. Good news number two, when it comes to paying for goods and services online, ditto. And again, the advent or the innovation of digital wallets has, I think, further enhanced what's already been a fabulous, an amazing customer journey, really. Can it be improved a bit? Yes, and one of the conclusions was that strong customer authentication is too prescriptive, in my view, frankly, and lots of people told us, we can get better outcomes, both in terms of the customer journey and from a fraud perspective, if you give us a bit more space to deliver the outcome rather than the prescriptive rules. And so those are the sort of good news, and that's important, right? Because that's underpinning commerce and retail and so on. The less good news is that when it comes to person-to-person payments, account to account, the UK process is a bit clunky. Sort code, account number, it's not bad, and actually advocacy for that journey is about 77%, which is slap bang in line with the global average. But when you benchmark it versus a UPI or a Swish or a Pix, those journeys are up in the 90s. So, it's not bad, it's not broken, but if we don't improve that journey over the coming years, we're going to start to look a little bit old-fashioned. And the other less good news is the degree of merchant retailer frustration with what they see as the costs of the card schemes. But we really prodded at that, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And from the data that we saw, on a quantitative basis, the costs on average, and I appreciate that as an aggregate, are about in line with the global average. They're neither particularly high nor particularly low. And when we pushed qualitatively at it, there was a lot of emotional frustration about the sense that there was no alternative to the card schemes. And people, merchants, particularly in an environment where cash is less and less an option, felt trapped. I have no choice but to. And that's what led me to conclude that choice is as important as value in this space, and that leads on to some of the open banking thinking and all that. So they were the sort of main conclusions on the here and now. Maybe I'll pause there.
No, that's great. And I think what I really enjoyed about the report is you've gone to quite considerable lengths to make this as objective as possible. And this is an industry with lots of vested interests. So
yeah, I mean, look, okay, so I've worked across retail, banks, building societies that compete against the bank, startup, etc. But in the process, we consulted across large financial services, small emerging financial services, big tech, fintech, consumer groups, regulators, and we received a lot of input, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was, I think, more than 40 written submissions, and many of them were of superb and really insightful quality as well. So we got lots and lots of input and different views, of course, on a number of subjects, and tried to be clear about where there was data to support a position and where it was more judgmental.
So you and your
small highly capable and energetic team
of the Treasury focused on this, and you synthesized, analyzed, and you came up with?
Yeah, just think they were not at the Treasury, they were seconded from Treasury, PSR, industry, and working as an autonomous and independent unit.
I would love to give them a name check, but they'd be too embarrassed if we did so. So
yes.
Good. So what were your conclusions? You had 10 that you came up with, but bring us the highlights.
So I think if we flow on from where I landed there in terms of the challenges and the opportunity, one of the areas where I think I moved my view quite a lot through the review was open banking. I was CEO of a member of the CMA 9 through the difficult birth of open banking, and it was a difficult birth. But in the course of this work, I was deeply impressed with the way that both larger incumbent firms and fintechs are now starting to use the open banking capabilities to really deliver some impressive customer journeys. And you come back to that QR, so I think there are both fintechs and there are big firms that can offer a QR code journey if you want to do it on open banking rails. And in fact, the only major friction in that are all the extra anti-fraud screens that everyone's putting in to say, are you sure, are you sure, are you really, really sure? Different topic. Let's go there later if you'd like. But I concluded thinking open banking has the potential to really address some of these issues. There are two things that I think need to happen. Number one, we need sustainable commercials around open banking, and it feels to me like it's been caught in something of a quagmire. I mean, look, we started building this thing in 2016. We really ought to know what we should be charging for it by now. And the second thing is the absence of consumer protection. And when I wrote that in the report, someone came back to me and said, but hang on a minute, you don't need consumer protection to grow open banking. And they're probably right, actually. I think I'd probably nuance that point if I was refining it again. You can grow open banking without consumer protection. But do we really want to? Because if there isn't some kind of embedded dispute resolution mechanism, where are people going to go in the event of a dispute? They're going to go straight to the APP fraud bit. So I think you need both sustainable commercials and a degree, not chargeback levels potentially, maybe a chargeback light kind of level of dispute resolution or purchase protection or something that means that there is not a car crash when things go wrong on open banking transactions.
So you came up with one overarching conclusion.
Right.
Tell us about that.
So this is then on to the second question, which was, and we can talk more about the first stuff and lots of important things there, but the really important question, I think, was how well set up is the UK to be a world leader in this space into the future? And my conclusion was kind of, I mean, I didn't say it quite as starkly as this, but you really can't know because there is no clear vision or strategy of where we're going overall. And if you don't have a clear picture of where you're going overall, how can you possibly know if you're going to get there or not? And also, my experience of working in large organizations is, if you have a really clear vision, then people line up towards that and people know. If you don't have that, then in that darkness, people default to lower level rules and bits of regulation, and the landscape gets much more fragmented as everyone tries to hold on to something that they think is the right thing to do. And therefore, and this was, I think, the strongest, most consistent bit of feedback, that we need a North Star. We need a statement of vision. And then sometimes people have said, oh, hang on, we've got lots of visions from, regulators. No. The regulators, in my view, shouldn't be doing visions for the industry that they regulate. In my personal opinion, they should be regulating. It's the government's job to define the outcomes at the highest level of what needs achieving. It's then the regulator's job to put regulatory frameworks around that, creating the space for the industry to innovate and compete towards a vision in a stable regulatory and workable regulatory environment. So that's what I feel we need to be shooting for.
And the government and the Treasury responded really warmly to that. They said, yes, we're up for it.
It wasn't sort of like, oh yeah, we were sitting around wondering what to do, and so thanks for giving us but they can absolutely see the need for it. And what I can say from everything I've seen, there's real commitment and energy going into this piece of work. And look, we're not naive, right? When we're doing the review, you can see the likelihood of political events over the coming year. And so we did work quite hard to engage with the relevant people in government, in civil service, as well as in parliamentarians of all different flavors, to try and ensure that regardless of any political shenanigans, this work is brought into in a way that it will continue at pace. And in fact, maybe even using some of the political timings to drive urgency. And you've seen typical language around summer and this year and that sort of stuff, which all means in a hurry rather than we'll do it sometime in the next Parliament.
Which is so refreshing. We love that bit of pace, a bit of urgency. Yeah. Now, there is an ability for you to ask questions in the room. There's a roving mic. If you've got a question, put your hand up and we'll get the roving mic to you. We will have to put our headphones on to hear it, however, but it will all work. We've got 10 minutes or so left to go. I want to touch on your view on the future as well now, Joe, and if you could talk a little through what that is.
Okay, so can I take it a little bit broader? You can't talk about payments without talking about future of payments without talking about future of money. And this, I think that we're at one of those really fundamental revolution moments, but it's much harder to get your head around. So when I started doing the review, and people were talking about digital pound and all this, I was like, hang on a minute, digital, I don't think I've had a non-digital pound for decades, right? What do we mean by digital pound? And I think I've started to understand what we mean, which is really what we are about to go through, I think, is a re-platforming of money. Okay, so stay with me on this for a moment. What was the first re-platforming? Well, the first money was barter economy, right? Pigs and cows, I give you 3 goats, throw in the dog, got a deal. First re-platforming, precious metals, gold, silver, physical equivalents for stored value. Then the next re-platforming was into paper, checks, notes of various kinds. And then, most recently, we had a digital re-platforming. But the nature of that digital re-platforming was kind of, our money now sits, instead of on a piece of paper, it sits on a spreadsheet behind an authentication layer in a bank or building society. The re-platforming that we are about to go through is some form of the tokenization of that money, whether it's distributed ledger technology, whether you call it blockchain, or however you refer to it. What I think we're broadly describing is the digital platform that supports our understanding of money and therefore payments moves from a static record in a place to a visible token, NFT, blockchain, whatever we land on, that is authenticated in a different way and exists in a different way and is tokenized. And this is of profound importance because it potentially changes everything, and it's already happening, which I think is why central banks are in such a hurry. And by the way, I think it is closely allied with the shift that we are about to see driven by AI in terms of authentication. That all of a sudden, up until now, all our identity has been concerned with us proving that we are who we say we are. As of now, in a world where any one of our voices can be faked in 3 seconds flat, we are going to start to need ways to be authenticate that what we are looking at is real. And once again, I think that points to tokenization and NFTs and some sort of things that authenticate on a tokenized basis. And that shift, I think, is what's making it really hard to call the future of payments when we're in the middle of what could be a really significant replatforming.
Completely. We don't want to design something for yesterday's technology.
This is a risk, and yet we all know that yesterday's technology keeps the world moving today, and we can't take any risk with the resilience and reliability and competitiveness of that.
So what can you share with the audience in terms of the stage at which the work that you're advising on is going through?
The people are beavering away. You saw in the review some questions I framed around what was the overall prioritization of resilience relative to convenience, value, accessibility, etc. Important questions to my mind, like where do we want competition in the market? Of course, we want competition, but the relative importance of competition in the infrastructure layer relative to competing in the consumer or retail or commercial domain. I started going, I really don't want to go anywhere near the question of digital IDs, but I think 31% of people raised it as an issue. And as per my comments there, I think you can't consider the future without at least taking a point of view on that subject. And then there are important questions that we haven't got to around financial, digital inclusion, financial inclusion, etc. As well. So work is going on, people are talking all the time, and there's real energy, things are happening. My fear when I started this is that, do you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? They go to all this trouble to find this ark, and then they go and file it in this warehouse in a crate with millions of other crates that look exactly the same. And my fear with it is we do all this work and then nothing would happen. That's not the case. Things are happening.
Really good, and my genuine sense of engagement from the community, from the trade associations we partner with, is that there's momentum and there's intention, and that what comes out when it comes out will be something that we will be working on, and because the industry needs this leadership.
I think so.
So who's got the mic out there?
Silent
Very
disco
good.
time.
Hold on, let's, who's got the mic? Yes, question down here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Good, hello, thank you for that. Just a quick question really, you touched on time frame, and obviously we have a general election in the UK this year, so I'm just interested if we can put some detail on the time frame in terms of the MPA I'm thinking about, and really just the other changes that are underway, standardising on ISO 222, not on the old standard. When are we actually going to see that come through, pre or post-election?
Very good.
And when's the election?
Good question.
Can we take these off, or we'll leave them on? Leave them on, yeah.
I really can't add anything over the update that was published, I think, on the 8th, I think it was, on the website that gives broad indications of timing. To my mind, also manage expectations around the altitude of a vision and a strategy. To me, it needs to provide enough direction to be clear about the future, but it won't be technical standards and price points and stuff like that. That's absolutely not the government's job. But it is the government that needs to do this, and not me, as it were. And I stress that because the government needs to keep ownership of it. So I'm afraid, I think I have to point you back to the update from the 8th of March. I'm afraid.
Very good. Other questions from the floor? There's one down here, please. Could you pass the mic over to the front? Oh, there's one at the back. Okay, yes, go ahead. Stand up and name and company, please.
Hi, I'm Gav. I work for Deloitte. Just a quick question about the future of money. Joe, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Given that you said that you think the direction of the future of money comes into tokenization, what do you think there's room in payments for tokenized bond deposit, tokenized bank deposits, e-money, fiat-backed stable coins, and CBDCs? Because they all seem to be covering the same thing with this tokenized world.
What do I think? Look, there's no shortage of initiatives in the payment space, and I think that is one of the issues. I think that what the government needs to do is set out kind of the, as I say, like sort of the vision, and what's critically important is that there is, I think, two things: interoperability and invisibility. I think we have gone wrong. Interoperability is obvious. Invisibility, we've gone wrong if we think the consumer has to do something differently as a result of any of the things that you describe. If suddenly we're talking about, oh yeah, you're going to have this separate thing or that, we've lost the plot. I think it should be invisible, and my caution would be as well that we should be very careful in the early stages of development about how we talk about some of these concepts. I mean, look, CBDC consultation got over 50,000 submissions. Now, that tells you that there is a public anxiety around what are you doing with my money. And I think if you talk about even ideas like programmable money, I mean, we know what we mean, but if you are, depending on your views, there are a lot of people that I think would throw up all over that idea just on the heading of it. So I think that we're at a tipping point of technology. It's early days. We don't know which the winner will be. We need to lay the framework, but let's be very careful not to bother the consumer with our angst and interest in deep technology.
Completely agree. There's a test on the way out, by the way, for anybody who can answer the question, what's the difference between deposit tokens and tokenized deposits? I'm still grappling with that one myself. Question I can't see over here. Yes, there's the mic. Please go ahead. Name and company.
Hi, thanks very much, Tony. Nelik Stavlukia, EPA Ambassador and Chair of the Open Finance Association. Joe, thank you for everything that you've shared with us today. Fully support what you're saying about national payments vision. What I think is important is that we actually focus on what we need in that vision, because you mentioned a prioritization and you mentioned resilience. Now, from my perspective, a vision is about innovation, competition and choice. When we talk about resilience in our payment system, that seems to me very much that's what we should have anyway. That is what the regulators, the Bank of England, require the scheme operators to do. So I'd be interested in your view as to where you think sort of the prioritization of what we need in the vision to actually have something that is forward-looking and the North Star needs to be framed.
It's a really good question. I think I probably have got a slightly different view on that, driven by having run large firms and the dangers of taking for granted areas like resilience. Payments people in my experience do the most incredible job of first and foremost protecting the resilience of the operation. But if the management layer does in any way have a sense that, oh, well, that should just happen, it will stop happening, because it won't get the investment, it won't get the prioritization. Those with articulate, exciting, shiny new business cases for exotic bits of functionality might start to displace a bit of boring old, technical debt that needs bringing up to date on something, etc. And I think we take our eye off the ball of resilience as being the absolute number one priority at our peril. And because we're operating as well in a constantly shifting landscape. Look at the global picture. Look at the geopolitical potential threats to our critical national infrastructure. I think, and I guess I've got scars on this that colour my judgment, and so I remain very open to other views. I would still have resilience unequivocally at the top of the agenda, because without resilience, there's not trust, and without trust, there is no innovation or competition.
Rock solid views. Thank you. Last question is from down here. Yes, please. Name and company.
Hi, thank you very much. Rob Jones from Lloyds Bank and the consumer payments business. Joe, we really enjoyed reading your report, and one of the things that stood out for us was there was sort of a theme around big tech and the emerging role of big tech.
Yep.
I'd love to hear your views on risks and opportunities arising from big tech, particularly for consumers, for businesses and for firms.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thanks for the question. And again, this was probably one of the other ones where my views evolved to the greatest degree and also oscillated. I started by wondering if big tech and digital wallets are actually a threat to resilience, and I was educated they're really not. They operate in an offline state. They can work really well. And then it got me thinking about, so how do we think about, we're used to payments providers that are quite vertically integrated, and we know how to regulate and think about those. How do we think about a proposition that's a really thin proposition that runs really wide across the industry? And then I look at the amazing customer journeys that are being enabled through the actions of big tech. And then I got curious about what that means in terms of potential disintermediation of existing financial services. Looked at the security and benefits of authentication that you get through big tech. And then I looked at sort of the risks of digital exclusion as we have more and more device-centric things. I guess where I landed on it is that there is enormous opportunity and some risk in the very likely scenario that big tech will play a larger and larger role in financial services, not trying to replicate what the banks have done historically, but rather building out their own business models against their own objectives, but starting to increasingly interface into the financial services world. I guess my biggest frustration was the siloed nature of our engagement with big tech. And if you look from a sort of overall national agenda, there are a number of issues in that space. You've got the encryption debate, you've got online harms, you've got frauds and scams, and then you've got some of the opportunities, et cetera, in payments. And my experience of big US, particularly big US corporations, they like to do a deal. They want to sit around the table and talk through the list of issues and say, yeah, we can move on this, not this, et cetera. Whereas actually from the UK perspective, we're really quite siloed because these fall into different government departments and different, even into different industries.
But the critical thing is that you've got to have them around the table.
Absolutely, and we did engage with all of them, and they were very engaging, and we had great discussions. And I think I think from my experience, they absolutely will engage. I think the stance is important, and I would personally have a quite collaborative stance towards them because, my goodness, they're major players and have done an enormous amount to improve outcomes for consumers and can do loads more. But let's, as you say, get around the table and engage on the thornier issues like origins of frauds and scams and those sorts of things.
Very good. Can I just say thank you so much. That was a whistle-stop tour. Joe Garner, much appreciated for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.